You're listening to Audiology. Support our work on Patreon and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. After General John Burgoyne surrendered at the battles of Saratoga in October 1777, and France joined the war on the side of the Americans, the British had to rethink their strategy against the rebellious colonies. In the north, their new approach focused mainly on raiding key economic and military sites, and they also tried but failed to draw General George Washington's Continental Army into a major battle. Washington smartly positioned his forces around the main British stronghold in New York City, carefully avoiding any engagement that would lure them out of their strongholds. For the year 1779, the British had grand plans that, according to Lieutenant General Sir Henry Clinton, the top British commander in North America, fell short due to not having enough soldiers and delays in getting the reinforcements that were expected for the campaign. Clinton's strategy was to tempt Washington into leaving the Continental Army's camp at Middlebrook in northern New Jersey by moving out of New York in large numbers to seize it. He hoped this maneuver would cut off Washington's supplies, forcing him out of the Hudson River highlands into an area where Clinton believed he could force a significant battle. In the late spring of 1779, General Clinton took a large force of about 8,000 troops up the Hudson River. This move was part of a broader strategy, because the British realized the strategic importance of Stony Point. This area controlled a crucial segment of the river, the entrance to the Hudson Highlands and access to King's Ferry. Clinton, leading a force comprising British soldiers, Loyalists, and Hessians, sailed upriver with the help of the Royal Navy and landed without any resistance. Stony Point was lightly defended by just around 40 American patriots. Before leaving, these defenders set fire to a wooden blockhouse, an unfinished fort on the site. The British then positioned several cannons on Stony Point's high ground to attack nearby Fort Lafayette. This action essentially shut down King's Ferry, a key crossing point on the river, located strategically between West Point and New York City. Meanwhile, seeking to divert Washington's forces, Clinton sent William Tryon and over 2,000 men on a raiding mission into coastal Connecticut in early July. Even though Clinton reduced his forces at Stony Point and Verplancks Point for this raid, it did not succeed in its goal of drawing Washington into a trap. The British fortified Stony Point with troops from the 17th Regiment of Foot, led by Lieutenant Colonel Henry Johnson. They were reinforced by grenadiers from the 71st Regiment and a company from the Loyal American Regiment. The fort also had a robust artillery presence, including cannons, mortars, and howitzers, with naval support from a Royal Navy gunboat and the armed sloop Vulture to defend against riverborne attacks. George Washington closely observed the fortifications from Buckburg Mountain and gathered intelligence on the garrison's strength, security measures, and other vulnerabilities, particularly on the fort's less observable southern side. With this information, Washington devised an attack plan and chose Brigadier General Anthony Wayne, a leader of the Pennsylvania line, to execute it. The fortifications at Stony Point, while formidable, were not built in the traditional sense of 18th century European forts. Instead of stone and walls, the defenses included earthen ramparts and abatis, sharpened felled trees placed in defensive positions. The site, positioned on elevated rocky ground, was naturally defended by a watery ditch in front and swamps on its flanks, making it accessible only from the west. On June 12th, General Wayne was put in charge of the newly formed Corps of Light Infantry, a top-tier temporary military unit. This corps, which was assembled annually from 1777 to 1781, pulled members from the most skilled light infantry companies in Washington's army. For the 1779 season, the corps was structured into a powerful brigade made up of 4 regiments, split further into battalions and companies, preparing a total of 1,350 soldiers for their mission. These soldiers, along with an artillery team ready to use captured British cannons, were considered not enough for a traditional siege according to military standards of the 18th century. Yet, Washington's strategy included a surprise attack at night, exploiting a critical weakness in the enemy's fortifications, where the wooden barriers didn't extend into deeper parts of the Hudson River, enabling a sneak attack along the shore at low tide. Washington laid out a plan that highlighted a primary assault route along this vulnerable southern shore, but also suggested alternate and decoy attacks if feasible. He entrusted Wayne with the flexibility to tweak the plan as needed, showcasing the great trust Washington had in Wayne's tactical ingenuity. The challenging mission necessitated a stealthy march in darkness, climbing Stony Point's harsh terrain with a strict order for silence, mandating that the men's muskets be unloaded to avoid any noise, a tactic reminiscent of one used by the British which had previously overwhelmed Wayne's forces. To create a diversion, Wayne directed 2 companies from North Carolina to feign an attack at the British defence's expected focal point, led by Major Hardy Murphy, who was to draw attention by opening fire. For the main and secondary assaults, Wayne chose Butler's 2nd Regiment and his own lead with the 1st and 3rd Regiments, alongside a detachment from Massachusetts, all moving carefully with specific men assigned to clear paths and lead the charge. Incentives were promised by Wayne for those who first breached the enemy's defences, motivating them towards bravery and distinction in battle. On July 15th, after rallying in the morning, the Corps of Light Infantry embarked on a march from Sandy Beach, just north of Fort Montgomery, starting at noon. The plan was to capture any civilians they encountered along the way to prevent them from alerting the British. Their journey was challenging, often moving in single file through tough terrain on what were barely paths, taking a roundabout path through Queensborough and over Dunderberg Mountain to stay out of British sight. By 8 p.m., they had reached the Springsteel Farm, about a mile and a half west of the enemy fortifications, and by 10 p.m. they were ready in their attack formations. The soldiers were provided with a ration of rum and their directives, along with pieces of white paper to attach to their hats. This clever tactic was designed to help them identify each other in the dark. At 11:30 p.m., they moved to their starting points for the assault, immediately splitting up to launch the attack right at midnight. Leading these attacks were the brave volunteers known as the Forlorn Hope, specially armed with axes and picks to break through enemy defences. Luck was on their side that night, as bad weather provided additional cover. Cloudy skies blocked the moonlight, and strong winds forced British ships in Haverstraw Bay to leave their positions, further aiding the Continentals. The assault began as planned at midnight, though not without challenges. The southern column had to navigate through 2 to 4 feet of water, delaying them and drawing British fire. Despite coming under fire, the Americans, led by Wayne until he was wounded, breached the British's first line of defence. At nearly the same time, Butler's column managed to fight through obstacles, marking the only American casualty in this effort. The 2 columns then took the summit simultaneously, catching a British regiment in an ineffective position. The stealth and speed of the Patriot forces rendered British cannons on the summit useless, as they couldn't be aimed low enough to stop the attackers. The first to breach the upper fortifications were led by Lieutenant Colonel François de Fleury, calling out, "The fort's our own," to signal victory, with the skirmish ending within 25 minutes by 1 a.m. The aftermath saw 15 American lives lost and 83 injured, while capturing 546 British soldiers, 74 of which were wounded. Despite varying reports on British casualties, with some Patriot sources claiming 63 deaths, historian Markham Boatner sides with the official British count of 20 killed. Additionally, there were 58 reported missing, some likely drowned in the Hudson. After this significant probationary, Wayne quickly informed Washington, stating, "The fort and garrison, with Colonel Johnston, are ours. Our officers and men behaved like men who are determined to be free." The following day, Washington visited to inspect the site and commend the troops. For his leadership and bravery, Wayne received a medal from Congress, a rare honor during the Revolution. Even though there was some debate over how important taking Stony Point really was, it ended up being a major boost for the spirits of the Continental Army. The victory was somewhat symbolically significant, because it showed that Washington and his forces had a strong presence near West Point. On July 17th, after the battle, Washington himself visited Stony Point. He praised the soldiers for their success, especially after seeing the difficult terrain they had to overcome during their assault. Washington had a bigger plan in mind, which included possibly attacking Verplancks Point once Stony Point was secured. He sent 2 brigades towards Verplancks, and also had Colonel Rufus Putnam create a distraction for the British forces there, which he successfully did, allowing the assault on Stony Point to start without too much attention from the British at Verplancks. The morning after taking Stony Point, its cannons were turned on Verplancks, but they didn't manage to cause any serious damage. The action did, however, make a British ship named the Vulture retreat. General Robert Howe was then sent to try and take Verplancks on July 17th, but without enough equipment, they could only set up a blockade and had to pull back when British reinforcements arrived. Washington never planned to keep Stony Point or Verplancks for long. After removing the captured artillery and supplies, the Americans left Stony Point on July 18th. The British took it back briefly, but left in October as they shifted their focus to the southern states. After the battle, the officers captured at Stony Point were quickly exchanged, but over 400 other prisoners were sent to a camp in eastern Pennsylvania. An attempt by some of the prisoners to escape on July 17th ended with 1 British sergeant dead and around 20 others injured. Reports from both sides noted that the American forces, under Wayne's command, treated the Stony Point garrison surprisingly well, especially considering the brutal treatment American forces had received at the Paoli massacre in 1777. However, the ease with which Stony Point was captured led to the British commander, Colonel Johnson, facing a court-martial in New York City for not defending the position adequately. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.